Phil, I'm available.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the next Cutter Cast. My name is Phil Winters. I'll be your moderator today. And just as a little way of introduction, we'll talk a little bit about what the National Center for Transit Research is, which is the program that Joel Walensky, our speaker, will be, who's the director of, will be talking about today. The National Center for Transit Research is also located here at the Center for Urban Transportation at the University of South Florida. The theme of NECRA is to certainly make public transportation and alternative forms of transportation, such as carpooling, vanpooling, etc., bicycling, and managed lanes, safe, effective, efficient, and desirable, and secure. One of the unique natures of NECRA as a university transportation center, it's certainly the largest university-based center that focuses on public transportation. The faculty are not just are primarily researchers, but do teach occasional courses in the academic world. But we also bring a strong operating and research background. Most of us have worked in the field before coming to Cutter. There's a variety of representative research projects that the National Center for Transit Research has generated. The top 5 publications in the past 12 months, you can get an idea there of the diversity of the topics, from various decision support tools, marketing-related programs, tools that help predict the impacts of transportation demand management. Other popular publications are listed below, too, just to give you a sense of the types of things that the range of research that the National Center for Transit Research has done. And the last thing I just cover on is most of this information is certainly available on the NECRA website, but you also see that we publish the Journal of Public Transportation. We host NEC conferences and recorded presentations. Today's presentation will be recorded as well. We offer a wide range of discussion forums, listservs for almost any public transportation and related need. We encourage you to do that. We have some with 200 to 1,800 members. And we offer a series of clearinghouses, including one of the programs we also support is the Best Workplaces for Commuters. With that, before I turn it over to Joel, I thought we'd do a few quick polling questions to get a sense and give Joel a sense of who's in the audience. So if you take a minute and click the little circle next to the square boxes on the colored boxes on the left. Thank you. Okay, that's great. It looks like we have I think there's some more people joining us. I'll give them another few seconds here. We can see 85% are viewing us from the comfort probably of their own office. That's fine. Glad to have everybody. And where are you located? State of Florida, elsewhere? Okay, I'll go ahead and close the polls now. 40% are from the state of Florida. Welcome to the rest of you as well. We're happy to have everybody. And kind of the type of organization you represent. Okay, fair diversity of organization types represented, with about 40% coming from a transit or TDM agency. All right, just give it another few seconds. All right, I'm going to close the polls now. And our last one before Just to give us an idea of how many of these Cutter webcasts have you attended before? Okay. Well, it looks about half of you. This is the first one you've attended. We hope you enjoy this and come back again. We're doing this every other Thursday. The schedule for the end of through March is available online. We are working on the next several months schedule that will be placed up on the website, and you'll be able to download that and view that as well. If you want to download copies of today's slides, in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you should see something that looks like 3 little sheets of white paper. If you click on that, you can download the copies of Joel's slides today. All right, with that, let me go ahead and introduce today's speaker. Certainly, as I noted before, that many of our research faculty have had years of experience in operating agencies, and today's presenter, Joel Volinsky, was the director of Broward County Transit prior to becoming the director of the National Center for Transit Research. During his tenure at Broward County Transit, the agency led the nation in ridership increases and passengers per mile increases in 6 of the 10 years he was director. Joel is a member of many APTA and TRB committees and has been the chair of leadership APTA Alumni Association. He's the longest serving member of the Florida Public Transportation Board of Directors and is an ambassador emeritus for the Transit Cooperative Research Program. It's my pleasure to turn today's presentation over to Joel. Joel?
Well, Phil, thank you very much. And oddly enough, my tenure at Broward County Transit was 10 years, so you couldn't go wrong either way you went there. And I would also like to welcome everyone who's joining us from all parts of the country and from many different agencies. Phil, I think we also have some questions that we wanted to ask our participants. And the first one is, has your agency raised its fares over the past 2 years if you're part of a transit agency? Okay, about 65, well, getting a little bit lower. Over 60% have raised fares in the past 2 years. And Phil, if you go ahead to the next question. Has your agency reduced service over the past 2 years? All right, at least half. And Phil, next slide. Has your agency both raised fares and reduced service over the past 2 years? All right, just about half and half. And I think we have one more question. Or maybe we don't.
No, we don't.
Okay, sorry. So that being the case, I think those who have joined the program here are at the right place, because certainly we've seen that experience around the country, and that was the reason that we developed this project and tried to find out what methods transit agencies across the country are using to address the very, very difficult circumstances that everybody's in. That being the weak economy, the recession that we're apparently pulling out of now, but it has been very, very harmful to the revenue stream of transit agencies as their property tax revenues and sales tax revenues have decreased. So our objective was to try to identify what transit agencies have done to generate new revenues or to reduce their costs in ways that don't hurt their passengers. In other words, you could certainly increase revenues by raising fares. You can reduce costs by cutting service. That really wasn't what we were interested in. We wanted to find out new and different ways that transit systems were trying to supplement their bottom line. And of course, as we collect this information, we wanted to get it back out to the industry, which is why we're having this forum here today. We sent emails out using the APTA's electronic directory to about 600 managers. We were able to drill down into the layers below the directors, whether it was operations or maintenance or planning or marketing or procurement, you name it. And we asked them very directly, what are you doing to help generate these new revenues or to reduce your costs? We then followed up with emails for explanation and clarification, did literature searches through the internet looking for articles. And what we found out was that we did get responses from 94 different transit agencies around the country, and submitting over 200 techniques that they were using to generate these new revenues or to reduce their costs. And some of them were quite significant, and others were much smaller, but they were all indicating that systems are out there doing their best, trying to reduce their costs, balance their budgets, retain the service that they have out there on the street. And we won't go over this in any detail because we've all been through this pain, and it's very sad to look at this, but a lot of agencies have gone through the types of steps that you see listed here. And for those of you who are from Atlanta, you would recognize that picture on the right, because the MARTA system wanted to alert the public that without additional resources, they were going to have to eliminate up to 25% of their service. And so for each bus that they thought would be taking out of service, they put these big red X's over the doors, indicating that this won't be here anymore unless we can find a way to generate some more revenue. So it's been something that most agencies have had to address. In fact, somewhat contrary to the poll that we just took, 84% of agencies reported to APTA that they were considering raising fares or cutting service. And by April 2010, 59% had already done so, and 70% were predicting that they were going to have budget shortfalls for 2011. There have been, for the first time in just years and years, and decades actually, transit agencies laying off employees. Of course, Chicago Transit and New York City Transit are quite large, but each of them had to let go of 1,000 employees. And MARTA was planning on this 25% cut. Fortunately, they didn't have to cut that much, but they still had to cut a fairly substantial amount of service. So what we found as people responded to our requests for information is that there's still a lot of creativity out there, and perhaps the only good thing about hard times and bad times is that it does force you to become quite creative and to come up with new ways to help yourself continue your mission. And as far as this project goes, we understand that the structural problem of where most funds for supporting transit comes from are very challenged right now, as we said before. But there are still things that transit agencies can do to help themselves. And even though it might not help completely close the budget gap that they were having, it does help the bottom line somewhat. And perhaps just as importantly, it demonstrates to the boards of those transit agencies and to the communities and the taxpayers that that agency is doing all it can to help balance its budget through creative means. Now, Chicago was looking in all directions for how could we save some money or make some new money, and they asked their passengers, and here are some of the responses that they got back, which is a little bit on the humorous side about putting snow plows on their buses and charging the city for getting rid of snow, or to allow furniture companies to demonstrate their furniture inside transit stations, or after a little bit of training and for a fee, let people experience what it is to drive a bus and pay. Let's face it, who hasn't ever really wanted to get out there and drive a bus? But the last one was to have a car for singles who would like to mingle and have it sponsored by Match.com as a way of generating some dollars, which actually is odd, because in India there are trains now where they are only allowing women to be on certain cars because they are tired of being oogled by men. But anyway, these were more humorous suggestions, but we're going to get into the thick of it now in terms of some of the things that we did learn. And there are quite a few. We're going to go through them fairly quickly. And we all know that advertising on the side of buses and on shelters has been with us for years and years, and has been a prominent part of helping generate revenue for transit. But there have been some new things that we found and we wanted to share with you. And one is that there are at least 3 agencies out there in the country that are experimenting with the digital LED advertising on the sides of their buses. The picture here you see shows the digital sign on the right side of the bus, and these would only be on the right side of the bus. And what these can do for a transit agency, of course, is multiply their exposure by a factor of who knows how much, maybe 25 times, because if you just have a cardboard or a vinyl sign, it's static and it stays there all day, and at night you can't see it. But with an LED digital sign, you can change the messages just like you see on exterior billboards on the highways. Every 10 seconds, flip it over to a new sponsor. You could time it by time of day. If you wanted to sell Egg McMuffins for breakfast, you have that in the morning. And if you wanted to advertise something else at night, you could flip something else during the night. These signs, the downside right now is that they're quite expensive. They're $50,000 to $60,000, and yet there are about 100 of them around the country, and they're trying to find out, well, will these signs last? How do they take bus wash machines? How would they take any kind of potential collision? But I think that it bears watching, because it does provide all these new opportunities for transit systems to have more sponsors and advertisers and bring in more revenue. In Santa Monica, they are thinking that they will be able to double their $1.3 million in revenue through these types of signs. Also, wrapping buses has been popular over the years, but now more and more transit agencies that provide train service, commuter rail or light rail, have also taken to this tactic. And as you can see on this slide, in Phoenix and in Denver, they are doing that out there. They get about $5,000 per month per car. So that could add up to a lot of revenue over the course of a year, and they're just starting. So I think as more companies see the exposure they get through this, they'll get more interest and more revenue. One of the interesting twists for the smaller agencies that you might want to consider is to use your capital funds to actually buy the equipment that produces the vinyl wraps. What you see in these pictures are not painted cars. For instance, that car on the left it's not a paint job. It's a vinyl wrap, and the same can be done for buses. The interesting example that we heard from was from Tallahassee, Florida, Star Metro, very, very creative agency. They've decided to team with their city to purchase the equipment. It cost about $30,000 to purchase the vinyl equipment. And they are going to do all of their own logos. They're going to do all of their own bus stop signs, their bus numbers, but they can also develop banners for themselves or for others. They'll reduce their costs by producing these things themselves, but they'll also be able to retain more of the revenue that they'll collect when they do work with a major advertising firm that can find the clients, but they won't have to pay the advertising firm to produce these things. They'll be able to produce them themselves. And they anticipate being able to increase their revenues by $100,000 next year. In addition to that visual sort of advertising, we now have what are sometimes called talking buses. There's audio advertising on buses. And as you can see here, a few agencies around the country have experimented with this, have started it. They did it by having an agreement with a certain company, the Continental Radio, to install their communication system and their GPS systems. And in addition, at no cost to the transit agency, they are able to program audio ads inside the bus so passengers get the opportunity to hear these messages from the transit agency sprinkled in with ads as well. And it's a nice way of getting some of the smaller businesses in the community to be able to take advantage of advertising if they wish. Now, agency announcements will always have priority, and obviously there are some folks that say, oh, come on, leave me alone. I just want to sit and have some peace and quiet. So they're experimenting with this to see just how and where it works best. But again, at Kansas City, they're expecting $60,000 in the first year, with the expectation it will go up considerably more in the future. And again, that was at no cost to them. And in addition, we also see more agencies that are selling the naming rights to either their stations or their entire train lines or bus lines. In Minneapolis, they sold the naming rights for their station next to their new ballpark to Target. It's now the Target station. In Cleveland, they have the Health Line. That's the picture you see down below. That is part of their new BRT. It was they sold that, and they get about $250,000 a year for the exposure that the major medical facilities along that line get due to this naming. And in New York City, they're giving exclusive rights to advertisers at stations, where you might see not just a billboard or something, but you'll see information on the pillars and the columns, on the ceilings, you name it, and it's generating substantially more revenue. Going back for a moment to those LED digital signs, those are also now being used at some stations that have a lot of exposure to a lot of passengers. And in addition, I think we may have one person listening in from WMATA. They have kiosks there now at the stations that are able to sell different items that you might ordinarily see at malls. For instance, video kiosks that you can rent. You could get them right there at your transit station, or perhaps it would be cosmetics or sunglasses or whatever it might be. So transit systems are finding out that the number of passengers they have are very attractive to all numbers of markets. In other areas of a transit agency's operations, like purchasing and procurement, there are many different things that they've tried to help to reduce their costs. And New Jersey Transit contracts out for a lot of its service, and what they've done is they now purchase the gas for their contractors, so they, as a public agency, don't have to pay the tax that the private company would have had to pay when they purchase their fuel, and it saves them $250,000 a year. Sometimes just doing a little review of things that you've been doing for years is very, very worthwhile. And Red Rose Transit in Pennsylvania determined that, or decided that, hey, we've been using the same bank for 25 years. Maybe we want to go out and get some bids on who might be able to provide services for us more economically. And they managed to save $25,000 through that process. And something as simple as putting printed schedules on buses and trains. TriMet in Portland, Oregon, determined that most of the time passengers really need these schedules when a schedule changes occur in the first week or two or three. That's when people need the schedules. They don't really need very many of them after that. And through careful analysis, they were able to reduce their costs. Phil, I just wanted to check, make sure everything is still sounding fine.
Yep, Joe, doing fine.
Okay,
and I just, this is a good interjection too, though, giving you an opportunity. If the folks look up at the top of their screen, they'll see a Q&A. If you click on that, you can submit your request, type up your question, submit it, and when Joel's done, we'll entertain those questions. So it's Q&A at the top. There's a number 1 out there next to it. Thanks, Joel.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Also, during the particularly difficult years we've just been through, a few systems, in a sense, went out hand in hand to the vendors that provide services and equipment and supplies to them and said, look, we're having a rough time and we're going to have to be cutting a lot of service. Can you work with us? Can you give us some discounts on what it is that you're providing to us? And in fact, in San Francisco and Chicago, they were able to realize considerable savings by the very thoughtful and generous contribution of reducing their prices to the transit system during the very, very difficult times. It could be that those conditions still exist in some places, and you might want to consider that. In Utah, they found out if they would contract out their cleaning services rather than doing it with their own personnel, they'd save a couple $100,000 a year. And in North County Transit in San Diego, they determined that there were some routes they just didn't need large 40-foot buses on. They purchased smaller buses that were more fuel efficient, cost less to operate and cost less to purchase. Sometimes there's a silver lining to dark clouds, and in this case, with the cutbacks that some systems had to make, they found out that they had some space left available in their facilities. And at Lynx in Orlando and at Chicago again, they had empty space that they could lease out, and in their cases, they made $155,000 in rent revenue at Lynx and $1 million at Chicago. New Jersey Transit also did the same, renting out an entire floor of their executive building. Long Beach Transit determined that, well, a lot of our costs are utilities. and had a real professional audit done, and found that when they took a closer look at their electrical costs, their use of water and waste procedures, they could cut their costs by 15%, and these audits are often available at no cost, so a very good investment of time. In Louisville at TARC, they also reduced their air conditioning expenses in their facilities by 55% by being more judicious in their design. And sometimes it's good to contract out, and sometimes it's good to bring things back in. It's a case-by-case basis. And at Rockford Mass Transit, they found out that when they could build their own body shop and work with their own personnel there, it reduced the cost of body work that they were sending out before by half, and also not experience any markup in parts. Red Rose again, and I think a number of transit agencies have done this. They now earn $20,000 a year from leasing radio towers to cell phone companies. And in Boston MDTA, they have a number of properties throughout their region that they now have billboards put on, and they earn $1 million a year from the revenue that they receive from that. Healthcare costs are going up about 10% a year and are a major factor in the cost of any transit operation. And different agencies have done different things. And up in Vermont, Chittenden County switched from having what would be a traditional premium-based copay, where from the very first visit, the patient or the employee pays some, and the insurance kicks in right there. They now go to a high deductible plan, meaning that the employer, the transit agency, and the employee share the costs of the initial $2,500 worth of medical expenses. The employer picks up 75%, the employee 25%, and after that $2,500 deductible is satisfied, then insurance kicks in. And what that's done is certainly reduced the cost of the experience that the transit agencies have had, reducing their premiums. And it also causes each employee to be a little bit more judicious in just what health services they go to receive. But it's worked out well for all parties. And in Ohio, at Akron, they looked for some real expertise in dealing with FMLA expenses, which can be really incredible. And to be honest, I think organized labor has a lot of national resource they can tap into to help understand some of these regulations better than just one single transit agency. And so this transit agency and some others have said, you know what, we need to increase the expertise we have in this. And they were able to reduce their FMLA expenses by 15%. I want to go down to the second bullet with BART. They found that they were able to provide a medical opt-out for those who have access to other insurance. So if someone's married or has a partner and that partner has access to insurance, then BART basically says, look, we'll pay you a certain amount of money to opt out, and they no longer have to provide the premiums for that individual because that individual is going to be cared for through the health services that their partner can access for them. And that's ended up saving tens of thousands of dollars for them. And once again, looking at more expertise, AC Transit, again in the Bay Area, hired a consultant to take a real closer look at workers' compensation, to review the medical billing to find any irregularities or payments that shouldn't be made. And they found that they were able to save almost $1 million by having someone just really be a good analyzer of every bill they were receiving. One of the really interesting things that we saw as a transit industry this past year was in Cleveland, where they have established what they call Transit Stat, which is really just simply means it's a data-driven management decision process that they have that is using software that's available to anyone with Microsoft Office Suite. And they are able to gauge and track and monitor virtually every activity that they have going on at the agency, and whether they want to take a look at bus breakdowns or overtime. They were able to, as a team, work together. They have biweekly meetings where they start to really get all the data they possibly can to look at what is happening with their transit agency. And again, without anyone feeling defensive, everyone contributes to the analysis and developing of solutions. And what they found was that just over a 2-year time, they were able to save $15 million through a variety of exercises. Some of it had to do with changing the number of workers they had on different shifts so that they could provide better maintenance to the vehicles and more reliable service to the public. It's been really fantastic, and Miami-Dade Transit uses something similar, the Six Sigma process, where again you really dig into the data, you take a look at everything going on in the process, and in this case they were able to reduce the warranty cycle time from 96 days to 55 days, and also reduce their percentage of buses down due to parts being unavailable from 10% down to 2.6%. Again, a better look at the data and statistics at MARTA. They were able to improve their attendance and save $4 million on absenteeism. We've been seeing more use of partners, partners beyond the federal government and the state government for a number of years now, and probably one of the better ones at this has been the Rochester Genesee Transit Agency in New York, where actually they have established or created a position, and this person who is known as the business development organizer or program director does nothing but go out into the community, every aspect of the community you can think of, to find out who could we partner with, who would be willing to pay some of the expenses of the transit services that we provide, whether it's employers, whether it's schools, whether it's apartment complexes, shopping centers, industrial parks. They've done a fantastic job at this, and they've increased their fare box revenue, or the revenue they receive, from 25% up to 39% as a result of getting more and more partners. Perhaps the biggest one being the local public school system that recognized that, you know what, we can carry a lot of our students on the public transit system more cheaply than we can do it with our own people. And out in Monterey, California, the transit agency has partnered with the Presidio military installation there. And what the installation was finding was that, hey, we're getting way too many cars coming on our base, and after 9/11, the concept of security became more paramount, and they wanted to reduce the number of cars coming onto the military base. And so they worked with the local transit agency to find a way to provide opportunities for people to get to the base by transit versus by their own car. And they took advantage of the Federal Transportation Incentive Program, the Mass Transit Benefit, that is available to all of the employees and the students and the faculty that they have at that installation. And with that, basically, those dollars are collected by the military installation and then turned over to the transit system, which then provides passes, monthly passes, to everyone that works at that facility. And that brought in another $2 million to the transit agency, and it allowed them to put 11 new routes out there. So anyone that has any kind of a military installation near your transit system, I would encourage you to see what kind of partnership you can develop. Many systems around the country, of course, are now partnering with their local universities and colleges. And in Nashville, they were doing that with Vanderbilt, but they're also the state capital, so they established a program that worked with state and county offices to subsidize transit for their employees, increasing their ridership substantially and their revenue as well. In Virginia, in the Virginia Regional Transit System, they're located in an area of the state and of the county where it was difficult for the state or the county to provide services to some of the more remote locations. And so they reached an agreement with the state whereby they now provide, the transit system provides the vehicle emission inspection services for the State Department of Motor Vehicles, and they receive a certain amount of income every time they perform one of those tests. And in addition to that, they also earn fees by administering the vehicle registration for the state from that location, and they're receiving 3% of every fee that's received up to the first $500,000 collected, and 5% for everything above. So they're not only increasing their revenue, but they're also providing a great public service. And for those people who don't use public transit, they can say, you know what, I may not be using the bus service, but I'm glad the bus service is providing this sort of service to us here. Otherwise, I'd have to travel a long ways to get it. In the operations arena, a lot of things that are being done. In Minneapolis, Southwest Transit determined that, hey, all this express service that we're providing from the suburbs into downtown, and then having all the deadhead mileage coming back to the facility wasn't serving them well. So they found a place where they could park at the edge of downtown, just leave the buses there during the day, have all of the drivers of those buses come back on one bus to the facility, and the expenses that they were able to reduce helped them save $100,000. The next bullet is perhaps one of the most controversial and interesting ones that we came across. And there are systems around the country that are, again, experiencing the requirement to cut their services substantially due to lack of revenues. And in North County, they were going to have to reduce their services 25%. I mean, that's just huge. But they started to take a look at whether there was a different way of a new business model they might use. And they determined that if they were to contract out the entire operation, they would be able to actually avoid that 25% service cut. And of course, this is controversial with any kind of employees that work there. In their case, and this has to be done on a case-by-case basis, they found that 40% of their employees were already eligible for the California retirement payments, and 25% of them would have been let go if they kept the same business model. So for 65% of their employees, this worked out okay, because those employees that could receive retirement would be, in a sense, double dipping, getting their retirement and getting their new private sector wage. And those who would have been laid off still have a job, even though their wages probably were reduced between 5 and 10%. And it's one of those interesting questions. Who takes priority? Is it the taxpayer, and is it the riding public, or is it the employees that work there? It's a tough situation, a tough choice to make. But in this case, they made that choice, and to this point, I think the board, the community, and most of the employees are relatively happy that they did. Another way of saving money in operations was out in San Joaquin. They replaced some of the fixed route service they had with route deviation. Route deviation helped them reduce paratransit expenses from $50 a trip to $19. Some systems have just decided to reduce their idling. A lot of systems have, and in the case of SARTA, they were able to save $200,000 just by turning off the engines and not burning the fuel. And another simple way, out in San Francisco, Muni took a look at, do we really need every bus stop that we have out there? Do we have to stop every block, or can we stop every 3 blocks instead? And they found that if they did do a very careful consolidation of stops and elimination of stops, they could actually save $3 million in operations by doing it. More savings in paratransit were realized in Louisville, where TARC partners with the private sector and yellow cabs to provide trips only when they're needed. They're not on call 24 hours a day to provide service 24 hours a day. Well, they are on call, but they're not used 24 hours a day. And instead of having a staff of their own and enough vehicles to provide every trip to every person all the time, even when they're not needed, they use yellow cab to fill in when their more modest staff now can't provide that trip. And also out in Contra, Costa County, they found a way to reduce their ADA expenses by providing vans to nonprofit agencies who already carry insurance, have volunteers who can provide a lot of the trips that were being provided by CCCTA. And this is pretty outstanding that they could reduce their cost per trip from $26 to less than $1 per trip, and also add more trips that people could take throughout the course of the year. Better planning, of course, is always good, and whether it's through comprehensive operations analyses or other techniques, you can see that these agencies here were able to reduce their expenses by quite a bit, reduce their services without really affecting their ridership. So that's always a good thing, to be more efficient. And Miami-Dade Transit were able to use the data from their automated fare collection system to do greater analysis of just who's getting on, when, and where, enabled them to reduce $12 million worth of service with really no effect or little effect on ridership. And while I'm no expert in the field of computers, as everybody I work with knows, there are certainly savings to be realized through technology, and out in California, Omnitrans is going through the process of using server virtualization, that they are able to reduce the number of servers they have from 75 to 57, and eventually they'll get it down to 12, which saves $100,000 a year on server replacement, and also reduces the energy that they are using and the space they need to store these servers. And at Denver, they're going back to what some folks used to have. They call them thin clients, but instead of giving every employee their own PC or computer at their desk, they now are using what is in essence a dummy terminal again, and having main servers that everybody works off of. And what this does is dramatically reduces the setup and maintenance time, and uses far less energy. These computers last 3 times longer, and as is becoming more evident in terms of getting rid of old computers, it's a real problem environmentally. But these are 90% recyclable. Say that. Technology and facilities as well. Again, in Ohio and Akron, they have put solar panels on their roofs and have geothermal walls installed, or wells, I'm sorry. And they are able to get their return on investment back in less than 10 years, and of course do something that's much more environmentally sensitive. And these costs are done through their capital grants, not operating grants. And in this case, they were able to use some of these special ARA grants to help pay for some of these things. And just a few more items to report. In Boca Raton City in Florida, they actually have developers and businesses that make so-called voluntary contributions when they come and they want to modify their buildings or build something new. And these companies have said, yes, it's worth it to us to be able to help our community and to be able to help our employees access our buildings, and we will pay what is in essence an impact fee to have more transit in our community. And in Miami-Dade, they have one of the most successful, probably the most successful managed lanes project on Interstate 95. The feds and the state worked together to put 2 managed lanes, hot lanes, along the regular general purpose lanes, and the revenues, much of the revenues that come from people that use those lanes go into paying for all of the transit service that's put on those lanes, as well as arterials that parallel that road. A number of agencies around the country are now either buying new or retrofitting their buses to have these new cooling systems put in by a company called Engineering Manufactured Products, I think it is. And instead of having a hydraulically driven cooling fan to cool their engine, they now have these small electric fans. And what they're finding is they're getting rid of the weight of that big hydraulic fan, and also those hydraulic fans needed to use about 45 of the horsepower of a transit engine. They're finding that buses operate more efficiently, can operate more smoothly, and the payback on these sort of pieces of equipment to keep the engine cool is a fairly short amount of time. So certainly recommend that to any transit agency that operates in any kind of hot weather. Also found that in Portland that they found a company that could rebuild the friction plates within their transmissions. So rather than buying new, this saved TriMet $250,000 a year. And in Indianapolis, they put in a new scheduling package that allowed them to reduce their overtime in their maintenance shop from 20% down to 9%, saving $500,000 a year. And one of my favorites, it doesn't always have to be high tech. Out in San Jose, they have some properties next to their buildings that obviously required maintenance of some kind, mowing and trimming and what have you. And it was costing them $14,000 a year to do it, but instead they reached a little agreement with a local farmer who brought his sheep in, and it's the sheep now that are keeping the grounds maintained. And it's interesting, and it's cheap, and as I say, it helps them save about $14,000 a year. So there are many more techniques, but I wanted to share those with you. And Anybody that would like more information on this is certainly welcome to contact me either at my email address here or at my phone number. I haven't yet had time to put all of these together in a report, but as Phil said earlier, if you'd like a copy of this presentation, it's easy for you to get one, and we'll remind you again about how to do that. So, Phil, with that, I'll close and open it up to questions.
Great. Thank you, Joel. That's a lot of information in a short period of time, I'm sure. And the questions are already flying in. If you would, for those that have kind of raised their hand on the questions, if you would go back and actually type in your question, then we will choose your question that way. So let's get started. Joel, the first question is, is there any experience with revenue generated by transit-oriented development-related joint development, land leases, or other?
Yeah, actually, there's quite a few examples of that around the country. Denver has been doing it for a number of years. When they built their transfer centers at both ends of their transitway in downtown, they had large office buildings built over the top, excuse me, over the top of the airspace. And I don't know exactly how much money they're getting per year. I'm sure it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent in terms of joint development at transit locations. Now, in terms of TOD, that's still a more recent phenomenon. I'm not 100% sure of what examples exist out there. I do believe there have been some examples of park and ride locations where apartment buildings have been built, and those apartment buildings are providing rent to the transit agency that provided the land for them to build on. I truly apologize that I don't remember which agency that was, but that's not exactly a TOD either. I mean, that's a single development at a single location. And however, if someone would like to email us that question, we'd be happy to do a quick search and see if we can't find something. I did not happen to get that provided to me when I asked for such information of all the transit agencies.
Okay, thank you. Our next question. Have any transit agencies offered bus maintenance services to outside agencies when they have excess capacity?
I think that that is happening, or was happening to a certain extent in Pensacola, Florida, and people might want to contact them to ask if they are still doing that. And I know in a related fashion, in Votran in Volusia County, Florida, they were sharing space with the school system, and they were both using the same facilities to do repairs of their buses. And there were times, I believe, that the transit agency personnel were doing some of the repairs for the school system and charging a certain amount to do that. In other smaller ways, agencies that have the ability to turn brake drums were offering to do that for any kind of trucking company in the community and charging them $150 a pop to turn to use that brake lathe. And those are expensive pieces of equipment, about $45,000 a piece, and not every small trucking company wants to buy one, so they found it was easier to work with the transit agency to do that. So I think that the thing to do is that you just have to be careful. You have to be aware that there may be other private sector companies that provide that service in the community. And if they do, you really don't want to get a tax-paying company angry saying, how come a tax-supported agency is doing that work that I could do? But if there isn't a company that can fill that gap, then I would say make yourself available and find out if there are companies that would like to utilize that service.
All right, Joel, the next question is kind of related to advertising. As many companies and websites use their website for selling advertising. Is that legal for transit? Is anyone doing it? Thanks.
I did not get that feedback, so I'm guessing here. But why not? If you can advertise on your facilities and on your buses and put billboards on your property, I don't see why it would be illegal to have an ad on your website. And my suspicion is that there probably are transit agencies that have done that. I just haven't heard it myself.
Okay,
But
Joel.
check with your attorney.
All right, Joel. Will some money-saving techniques that you've mentioned result in requiring less personnel, resulting in layoffs?
Generally speaking, what you find is that technology doesn't always result, or even often result in reduction of force. It just allows you to provide a better service to the public. And there are often opportunities, if there is anyone that does find themselves no longer needed to do a certain task, where they could be moved over to some other function within the transit agency. So I haven't really heard too much of that. What I hear is when, for instance, they use technology to help in their customer service department, where more calls can be taken through automated systems and what have you. It helps them cover more calls than they possibly could with the people they have. It helps them not have to hire new people, but it allows them to serve more people with the same people. So it may be that there are people who are on this program today that have evidence of that, and if they'd like to share it, maybe they can type that in and let us know. But no, I haven't really heard that.
Okay. This question, I think, gets a little bit towards how the information they provided to you is basically, how did the agencies identify, I guess, the best cost savings? And maybe related to that is, did you get any comments about, we tried this and it didn't work?
Yeah. Well, in terms of the best methods, it really would depend on each transit agency, how they decided to respond. Excuse me. The tactic we used was to try to reach each major manager through the APTA electronic directory and ask for them, hey, what did you do? In other cases, they said, well, we're going to send this to our budget director or to our CEO. We don't feel like answering this individually. So it didn't matter to us really whether it was a small savings or a small revenue generator or a large one. We wanted to find out as many as we could so that they might be replicable at other transit agencies. Maybe it's just something people haven't thought of. And I owe a great debt of gratitude to everybody, all 94 agencies, that took the time to provide their responses via email or phone to share whatever it was they had. What was the second part of that question, Phil?
It had more to do with, did they report any, say, mistakes? They tried something and it did not result with the savings that they expected or had hoped to see.
Yeah, maybe it's just the way I'm training my mind. I wasn't concentrating on those so much, but
successes and lessons learned, I guess, the other half of that. So
yeah, that's true.
Okay.
No, I didn't get any major stories of failures. There may have been one or two. Hey, we tried this, it didn't work. But and it's a good question, because that is something that somebody would want to know before they tried it. And maybe the best I can do is review the hundreds of ideas that came back to us and provide something in a way that those who have tuned into this presentation, I could send out a mass email or something.
It sounds like a sequel, Joe.
Yeah, hey, there you go.
Okay. There are a couple other comments that came in terms. One was you didn't mention digital advertising as a possibility to generate ad revenues, and also that you didn't mention maybe the use of incentive fares or yield management as an option to refocus riders in non-peak hours in order not to have crowded buses.
Mm-hmm.
Did those come up, I guess?
Not a lot. There was one system, and again, going back to Rochester, that reduced their fares from excuse me, $1.25 to $1, and actually were able to expand their services because they were getting partners, and it definitely helped increase ridership. There are some small systems around the country, usually in areas with universities where they're partnering with them, where they've decided to make the system basically free. There are no more fare boxes on their buses, and anybody in the community can get on the bus. And as you might imagine, that increased ridership substantially, which might help them with additional grant money if the state allocates any money by a factor of ridership, or if their federal grants are determined to some extent by ridership. So there were those examples. In prior years, Phil, I've done this sort of project before, and those that implemented one-day passes and got rid of transfers generally found that it increased their ridership by anywhere between 5 and 10%, and also increased their revenue by about the same amount. So that technique has been very successful in terms of new and different fare instruments and new fares for passengers.
Okay, we have a couple more questions, Joel, then we'll wrap up today. And I hope everybody will hang in. We have a short evaluation. We'd love you to have your feedback after these questions. One of them, the comment was I-95 toll revenues that you mentioned in South Florida are being transferred to Miami-Dade Transit using what type of mechanism to transfer it?
Well, all of the tolls are collected electronically by the state DOT, and they keep a very careful track and accounting of all of those tolls. And there was basically, I believe, an agreement that was reached between FHWA and FTA and the state of Florida and the county that here's how we're going to distribute the revenues that are collected. Needless to say, some of the revenues are needed for road maintenance, and but a good chunk of it is given to the transit system to pay for those new express services that they put on. And what's happened is that the buses used to operate in HOV lanes, or one HOV lane, and they were kind of stuck in the same relatively slow traffic as the rest of the vehicles. But with these two HOT lanes, what the riders are guaranteed is a ride that averages at least 45 miles an hour. And so they were able to provide more service with the same buses, which results in a savings as well, because they were able to get from point A to point B much more quickly and get back to the start point again. So it's been a magnificent program in all respects. Passengers are getting a faster ride. The agencies are actually reducing their cost to provide the service, but they also are gaining revenues to provide new service along parallel corridors.
All right, two more questions. Which techniques were most frequently reported?
I think that partnerships with universities is something that is growing around the country, and oddly enough, it's not a cookie-cutter thing. Each one is based, again, on case-by-case negotiations between the university and the transit system. That was, I think, perhaps one of the most common. Another one was a careful analysis of existing service, again, through generally hiring a consultant or using your own staff to do a comprehensive operations analysis. Find out really who is using the system where and when. And if you can reduce certain services without affecting much of your ridership, then you've really done a good service for your community. Obviously, a few passengers will be upset, but I think that the fact that you're able to provide the vast majority of your passengers with the same service at reduced costs is something that is more and more common. So, I would recommend a real careful look at just, who is riding your, not who in terms of individuals, but the numbers of people, on what segments of the route are they riding, on what times of day are they riding, and then really fine-tune your system to help reduce your operating expenses without really disadvantaging many of your passengers.
All right, Joel, thank you. And one more question. Is anybody trying to attract ADA paratransit riders to group off-peak trips provided on selected days per week, varying by neighborhood?
Again, I didn't hear that in particular. We did hear from some agencies that were modifying their regular transit service to be more deviated service so that they could pick up people who had been using ADA-specific service. And that issue about providing a van to nonprofits where they could now start providing service to people who would otherwise have used the ADA trips were the most effective, but I did not hear of that one. But that just goes to show there's probably hundreds of other examples of being more efficient and generating new revenues than we heard. Even though we had 94 agencies report back, well, there's at least 400 of them out there that are providing service. And, you know, I can only hope and wish that when we make these requests that they would follow through. But maybe if we can get this information out, it'll encourage more agencies to share what they know, because we didn't do this for us. We did this so that everybody could get the information and, again, try to institute these practices where they make sense in their own communities.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Joel. And that will conclude today's session. It is being recorded, and we will announce the playback, send the link out to the people that subscribe to the Cutter listserv, and you can do that from the Cutter website, www.cutr.usf.edu. It's totally free, and you will get all announcements of upcoming seminars, including the next Cutter webcast, which will be February 24th, 2 weeks from today, talking about alternative fuels in public transportation by Dr. Cecilio Kakis and our interim director, Steve Reich. So I hope you'll join us. Same URL, same telephone number for those who were able to dial in. So nothing there. We will greatly appreciate it if you take about a couple minutes just to complete the online evaluation in front of you. And with that, again, thanks to Joel, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
And my thanks to everybody for joining us. Thank you very much.